Hi friends, let's talk about all the books that I loved this year. There's a stack of books, like a stack. I think I had one of the best reading years I've ever experienced this year. I let myself truly just enjoy the books I was reading for whatever reason I was enjoying them, and it really changed my outlook on reading. Yes, I'm a critical reader, but yes, when enjoyment is so high, let me fly high. Which actually made this list incredibly hard, but also incredibly easy. I think I had some really standout reads, but I do have a decent amount of honorable mentions as well. But before we get started, I would love to know what you think my favorite book of the year is going to be. I feel like I've talked about it quite a bit on my channel. I don't think that any of the books on this list will be a surprise to you, but I would love to know what you think my favorite book of the year is going to be, so let me know down below. But let's jump into my large list of honorable mentions. My honorable mentions are books that have left an impact on me throughout the year, that even if I didn't give 5 stars, some of these do have 5 stars, they're a book that I will, when I think back on my reading year this year, I will think of them. Honorable mentions, number 1, Red Sister. This was a reread for me, and I did bump my star. Originally I gave it 4 stars, and I bumped up to 5 stars upon reread, but because it was a reread, I didn't want to count it in like my top 10, but this is one of my all-time favorite series, so unsurprising that I loved this and would shout from the rooftops about the Book of the Ancestor trilogy. We have Gleanings by Neil Shusterman and other authors. This is a short story collection set within the Scythe world. I actually loved the Scythe series until the last book. I loved being in this world specifically, and diving back into this world in short story format and not being with our 2 characters really worked for me. I had a really incredible experience reading this story. I actually felt a little bit different about the ending of the series after reading this. I really enjoyed this collection, and it definitely deserved the 5 stars that it got, but it didn't make it to like top of the year. I think it's because it's just a short story collection. The Air Awakened series by Elise Kovo was a series I just binged through. All 5 of these books were, in my opinion, something I will look back on and be like, I really enjoyed reading that YA series. So this definitely hits hard for me. I cried in these stories, and I do want to shout this out as an honorable mention. A really surprising one for me was Jade Legacy. Actually, after having not liked the second book, Jade War, very much, I thought I was going to really dislike Jade Legacy. I have never cried so hard in a book before. I cried so hard at the end of this, and this was a book that made the entire series more of a favorite for me, as even though I didn't love this second book, the third book wouldn't have hit so hard without the first or the second book, and like their existence and the way they connect really affected me, and I will be thinking about this conclusion to a trilogy for a long time. So although it did not get 5 stars for me, it did get 4 stars. It is a book I will think back upon when I think about this reading year. Another honorable mention is Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison. I really enjoyed this one. It's been only a couple months since I read it, but I've been thinking about this book since I read it and how much I really want to try more from Rachel Harrison. I loved the tone of this, the narrative style. I loved the discussions we got. It was a 4-star book, but I think it will be a book that I think about for a long time, and I think I really enjoyed this story. When I think back on it, I'll forget everything that like I critiqued and just remember the good moments, so I think it's an honorable mention. And my last honorable mention goes to The September House by Carissa Orlando. I gave this one 4 stars, and then I went to a live show about 2 months later, and I just raved about the metaphor in this book and the deep discussions and how it tackled abuse and the comedic relief of the humor, and I really fought my way through that live show because a lot of people didn't enjoy this one, but I think that this book was incredible, and I really talked myself into thinking that maybe I should have given this book 5 stars from that discussion, so I think that this also deserves its honorable mention. I think it was a really standout light horror read for me. Those are all my honorable mentions. We can get right on into the top 10 now. We are going to start at the bottom of the list and work our way up. So in 10th place, I didn't want to put this on my list because it means that all of you will probably read it, and I don't think that this book specifically is like the book I would suggest if you're trying to get to know my reading taste, but this was a book I had so much fun with that it had to make this list. Like pure enjoyment vibes, this was one of the funnest experiences I've had. Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I don't think that this is top tier literature, but it's in the best way possible. Like, I don't think that the plot is the most original, well-developed plot. The characters are really like driven. However, I have never smiled, laughed, had a hangover like this before. I annotated this, and there's so many tabs in here of just like cute banter-filled moment. Every line in this book is a one-liner. And if you don't like that, I 100% understand, but this just really worked for me. It brought back my, like, YA roots, like Hunger Games style, Red Queen style, just, like, something that I could enjoy, not think too hard about, and have a really fun time. This hit for me at the perfect moment, and I really, really loved it. So that's why it's getting the 10th spot. I will think about how much I enjoyed this story and my reading experience reading this for years to come. This follows our main character, who is born powerless in a world where the powerless are killed off because everyone has to have powers, or the king feels threatened by this, like, plague that happens around the powerless. So our main character has been hiding the fact that she's powerless her entire life. When she gets picked to be in a trial competition somewhat similar to the Hunger Games to get all the riches and the glory, and she somehow stumbles into being very close connections to the prince, and that isn't always good for her. The Hunger Games inspo, the Red Queen inspo in this, I ate up every nod to those, and I had such a fantastic time reading this that it had to have my 10th spot. In 9th place, we have The Girl in the Mountain by Mark Lawrence. This is the second book in the Book of the Ice series. This is set in the same world as the Book of the Ancestor series, but is a separate series. I remember reading this year and texting my friends like, holy crap, what just went down? I liked the first book but didn't love the first book, and this was an instant 5-star for me. At finishing it, I was just like mind blown. My mind was exploding with everything that just happened and what I just experienced, and how much I had grown to enjoy the characters and the world building and the plot, and like really intrigued to see how this ends. I have not finished this series yet, and that is a goal of mine for 2024. We're doing it for Backlist Book Club, and I'm really excited. I will be rereading book 1 and then book 2 and then reading book 3 with everyone, and I'm just like really excited to see how this entire series wraps up after this ending. This follows our main character, Yaz, who lives on the ice. On the ice, you get tested at a certain age, and if you pass, you pass, but if you fail, you're pushed into the pit of the missing. When Yaz's brother fails, he's pushed in, and Yaz jumps in after him, and she realizes not everything is as it seems under the ice, or what she's been told. If you've read the Book of the Ancestor, you'll be really interested, I think, in learning more about the world and the ice, but you definitely do not have to read one to read the other. In 8th place, we have a horror. We have The Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. I read Mary last year and I really enjoyed it, so I was very excited to pick up Nestlings. I think Nat Cassidy just does claustrophobic writing so well. I just feel like I'm suffocating while I'm reading his stories, which gives me the chills and the creeps, and I'm here for it. This follows a couple who has been down on their luck, and they think that they've finally gotten their lucky stride when they win the free housing lottery, or the low-income lottery, where they get an apartment at a rich neighborhood, a really, really high-end apartment for the price of someone who can afford it. That makes a low income. They move into this apartment, even though it's not wheelchair friendly, and our main character just had a child and a nerve was hit, so she is temporarily paralyzed with the ability to go to physical therapy and hopefully get better, but it's not like a given. And not all is as it seems at this apartment. This is described as Rosemary's Baby meets Salem Lot, and I think that is a perfect description, and I thought this was a roller coaster of a ride, and I just truly, like, I hated characters a lot. I was annoyed with characters. I loved characters. I rooted for characters. I wanted characters to die, and I was always questioning what was going on, and I think that that is a masterpiece of a horror book, and I will definitely be recommending Nat Cassidy in general for years to come. I think that this was such an incredible horror experience, and I hope more people read it. In 7th spot, we have another horror, Ghost Eaters by Clay McLeod Chapman. I just want to feel like very much on the edge of my seat when reading horror. I want to be questioning things. I want to feel like creeped out and weirded out, intense emotions while I read horror specifically, and this did that for me as well. In this story, we're following our main character. She was not part of the best crowd when she was growing up. She had a boyfriend named Silas who was a drug dealer and got her into some tough positions. She hasn't seen Silas in a long time, but he shows up at her front steps and she drops everything for him like she always has. But in a few days later, he shows up dead, and there is a new drug on the market called Ghost, and if you take it, you might get haunted. The story of grief, the discussion on grief in this, on top of the weird, oh my god, gross, I can't believe what I just read moments, were top tier for me. I really enjoyed this. I was grossed out at times. I, again, felt claustrophobic in times of the writing, and had such an incredible experience with this. There's weird things that happen in this, and I enjoyed the weird so much. And I love this cover. Like, this is one of my favorite covers to ever exist. So I'm really happy that I read this earlier this year. This is definitely one of my, if not my all-time favorite horror book. I mean, both of these. They're taking up these spots for a good reason. In sixth spot, the whole entire world was blown up by this book, and I'd like to say that I was probably one of the first. Pat myself on the back for being on top of a trend. I'm not normally. I feel like I read new releases really, really late, but Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, I again just like had so much fun reading this. I read this the day it came out for a vlog. I had not heard anything about it. So I went in with like very open eyes, and then this blew up like the next day. Like, I finished it in one day. I sat down, read it, stayed up till 5 a.m. The vlog is there's proof, and I just like thought this was a fun time read. Yes, I understand the complaints people have about it, but again, it took me back to my childhood reading Divergent, Hunger Games, Twilight, those books that I stayed up all night reading, that I couldn't wait to get the next book, that I was picking a team and I was rooting for characters and I was just like fully immersed in the world, and this did that for me. I just felt like I was a teenager again. I loved the romance, I loved the dragons, I loved the fun banter, and I personally liked the world building. Yes, it's not like the most epic of epic fantasy, there's plot holes at times, but I don't think that was the point of the story all the time, and I just really, really enjoyed what I experienced reading it. I 100% get why some people don't like it. For me, it deserves number 6 spot. Definitely think that this will be a book I remember for a long time. This follows our main character, Violet, who was going to be a scribe, but her mother forces her into the dragon riding school. There's one thing about this dragon riding school. At the end of it, you either bond with a dragon or you die, and the rate of survival is not very good, especially for someone like Violet. And we see Violet endure a lot, we see her overcome a lot. There is some representation in this because she has a chronic disorder, and I loved that the magic didn't magically fix this. I think that this book does so many things well. I truly think it deserved the hype that it got. I think it has some of the best animal companions. Like, these dragons are so much fun, and I'm really excited to see where the story goes in further installments. I think that this is the only series that I'm read that I wouldn't say Iron Flame was on this list. I have read Iron Flame, and I liked Iron Flame, but it was like, it wasn't even an honorable mention. This is literally just Fourth Wing taking up this spot, where I believe we're about to get into series world, where I put all series, the entire series, is just one book for me on this list. The next addition to this list is the Nightborn Duet by Carissa Broadbent. This starts with Serpent in the Wings of Night and ends with The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. It is a 6-book series full of 3 duologies, so this is a completed duology, but like the series isn't over yet. I read them pretty much back to back. These both deserve this spot together for me. And if I was making a top 10 list and not putting series together, my entire top 10 list would pretty much be like 2 series. So I'm just putting these series as a whole on this list, and this is one of them. I prefer Ashes, but they're both incredible 5 stars. Like, I literally couldn't place them elsewhere. Either of them deserve this spot on this list for me. This follows our main character, Aurea, who is a human in a world of vampires. The Vampire King adopted her for some reason when she was little, and now she's just been trained her whole life to survive within vampires, but she's always at risk. So when the Kajari comes around, she enters into it. This is a tournament where if you're the last one standing, the goddess Nyaxia will gift you one gift, whatever it is. Aurea joins up, she's got to beat a bunch of vampires, and she has to be the last one standing as a human. Easy, right? And this is a fantasy romance. I think it's a fantasy done really, really well. Again, the discussions on grief in this story are incredible. The discussions on losing oneself, incredible. I think the trials in this one were really cool, and I really just overall think that this is fantasy romance done completely right. I don't think I will read a fantasy romance that tops this. I think that this is my all-time favorite fantasy romance, to be honest. I'm just putting it out there. Like, if something tops this, the world is ending, because it is so freaking good. Yeah, chef's kiss to Aurea and Rain. In number 4, we have The Will of the Many by James Islington. I am shooketh to see this book on this list, because if you were here last year, James Islington was on my worst of the year really quite easily. I read Lycanius last year and did not like it. Like, it was not for me at all. So I was hesitant to pick up The Will of the Many, but I always say I'm a story person, not like an author person. It really matters to me what the story is and how it's done. There's no author, even the ones that I would call my favorites, that I think could write anything and everything and I would always love it. It's very dependent on how it's done and what the story is about. Knowing that gave this another chance after I'd seen some people pick it up and like it who didn't love Lycanius. I'm so glad I did, because now it's here. Because this was what I wanted out of Lycanius. I think you see the threads that were written in Lycanius and just improved upon in this. The magic, the world, the characters, like this entire story is so freaking unique. I loved it so much. The Will of the Many follows our main character who was orphaned when he was young. He actually was like the prince, I guess, of a rival nation. When the hierarchy comes and kills everyone in his family, he somehow gets away and finds himself an orphan within the hierarchy society, and he's hiding himself and who he is from the hierarchy. Flash forward a few years, he ends up being adopted by a significant person up in the hierarchy who asks him to go to the school for the rich kids, essentially, and spy to figure out what's exactly going on without knowing who he is, first off. And I think that sets up a very interesting storyline on top of what the magic is. The magic is the will. So essentially your strength, your will, and you can imbue it to other people as well. What happens here is essentially a giant pyramid scheme. A giant pyramid where a certain amount of people cede their will to one person. And then that person cedes their will to another person, and that third person has a bunch of people still ceding their will. So it's just like a pyramid of like branching off. So like 5 people, then 4 people, then 3 people, then 2 people to 1 people. And there's like a giant pyramid of all these people ceding their power to you, so you have all the power from the people underneath you. And I think that was really, really interesting and kind of showed how society worked too. I really, really liked this magic system. The characters pulled me in. I cheered so hard for our characters in this. I was rooting for them. I wanted to know everything about them. I went to school with them. I had so much fun reading this. I ate the story up. I could not put it down, and I truly think that it deserves more love than it gets. So please, 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 if you're doing a booktuber favorites, this is one that I would recommend 100%. 100%. If you're trying to find a book that I really would suggest, if you haven't read The Will and the Many, maybe you should try it. And in third place, we have another series. This is actually a 5-book long series, but I only own the first 3. My favorite from the entire 5-book long series is the third book, which is From Cold Ashes Risen. But I'm just going to hold up the first book to like represent this entire series, because I think the entire series is... I really just binged this series and I loved it. Along the Razor's Edge by Rob J. Hayes. This is an indie fantasy series that is so underrated. Again, if you're doing booktubers favorites, maybe this one. I'm pretty sure the audiobook for this is on Audible Plus if you need an audiobook. I have not loved a character like Eska in a long time. She's a character that is going to stick with me for the rest of my life. This entire series, we watched her grow up, we grew with her, we learned with her, we cried with her, we cheered with her, we experienced all these life experiences with her, and it made me connect to her so much while having an epic plot. She is a petty little person, but I related so hard. I understood where she was coming from. She's a character that makes you go, oh my god, sometimes you just want to strangle her. But you also understand all of her decisions, and you just like, I don't know, like Eska's Eska, and I love it so much. I love her. And I love the found family aspects in this. I think the first 3 feel like a trilogy, and then the last 2 feel like a duology, even though they do all follow Eska, and I couldn't see the 5-book long series without all 5. There is a like conclusion and a start, I feel like, to either, because there is a time jump that happens. But Along the Razor's Edge follows Eska, or Askara, who was a sorcerer in a war. She fought for the rival nation, and when they lost, she ended up waving the white flag and surrendering. The nation that won put her in the pit, which is essentially a giant pit far, far away from the sun and the moon or any kind of natural light, where they put their worst criminals. And she's cut off from all of her magical abilities because she is a sorcerer, but like the magic in this is so interesting. And she now finds herself stripped of her magic, very angry, and trying to escape the pit. The things that happen in the series, the connections, the allies, the found family aspects, like so good. And then on top of that, there is a really cool magic system. If you're a fan of like Brandon Sanderson magic system, I think you will also love Rob J. Hayes magic systems. Rob J. Hayes is an incredible writer in my opinion. I honestly probably could have put Pawn's Gambit as an honorable mention. This is a magic system about sources that will kill you, but they're also the source of your magic. So you ingest a source. If you are not attuned to that source, you will die within minutes. You need to puke up the source. If you are attuned to the source, you'll be able to use the magic, but it will still be slowly killing you. So you have to like not let it sit within you for too long, and you will have to puke up the source. There's a lot of puking in this book, just so everyone knows. But it is a series that I absolutely loved. It's one of my all-time favorites. I can't believe we're already on second place. Like, how are we already on second place? There are 2 series I read this year. Second place and first place. Can you now guess which one's which? I wonder. I really wonder. I think some people might have thought Eska would have been second or first. So, interesting to see. But she was close. She was dang close. I will tell you that. In second place, we have The Chronicles of the Unhewn Throne by Brian Staveley. This was a recent edition. I read this back in September and I adored it. I ate it up. I read it so fast. I binge read it. My favorite in this series is the second book, The Providence of Fire. I think things come together and escalate and you see a really epic scaled plot within this one. But I am just, again, gonna hold up the Emperor's Blades. This follows 3 siblings who, when the Emperor, who is their father, dies, they have to figure out who murdered him, what's going on, and what their destiny is meant to be. Their father has separated them and put them on different life paths, and what that means for all of them is very different. We follow the oldest son, who is the heir to the Unhewn Throne, as he studies to be a monk. We follow the middle child, who is training to be a part of the Ketrel, which is an elite force of soldiers who also fly on giant birds, also called Ketrels, which is really cool. They fly in like squads. I liked that element quite a bit. And then we follow the daughter, who is the youngest, who can never be the heir to the Unhewn Throne because she's a girl, so she can't sit on the throne. She's seeing a lot of the politics and stuff. Honestly, I will say, okay, the first book wasn't my favorite. It only got 4 stars. But the second and third books were like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stars. The way that the story expands, the characters expand, the world building expands, like all of it just expands so incredibly and so naturally was amazing. I think that these are characters I will think about forever. Some of these are my favorite female characters I've read. I think that this was one of the most unique stories. Honestly, I say that about every book I read because I really love unique stories, but like this was just such an incredible like character-driven, plot-driven, world-driven, like any type of reader I think will enjoy this. Yeah, I loved it. And then last but certainly not least, because it's number 1, I don't even know how to talk about this book. I've talked about it so many times on my channel, but The Aurelian Cycle by Rosaria Munda. Starting this year off, I don't think I would have told you that YA was going to be something that would make my top 10 list. This is a YA fantasy series, and I was scared of it. I didn't want to read it because I thought I'd outgrown YA. I wasn't really interested in it. They weren't connecting with me as much. I mean, technically Powerless is also YA, so like this changed a lot for me because this is better written than most of the adult I read. This hit harder than most of the adult I read. This has dynamic characters and deep discussions on human power, human wealth, human morals, on power corrupting, on privilege, and how we're born affecting how our outcomes in life because we'll never be on even playing fields. Like, this story is one of the deepest stories I've ever read. I can't express how incredible this trilogy was. Yes, it's YA. Yes, there's a romance. Yes, there's dragons. But the core of the story is about power corrupting. We're following our main characters, Annie and Lee. There's just been a revolution. The old ways are gone. There used to be highborns. There used to be kings. There used to be aristocrats. But the rebellion has happened. That's gone. There's a level playing field. We follow Annie and Lee, who are orphaned. They're put into an orphanage and they become friends. Lee happened to be the son of one of the ruling families. No one knows this, but he did. Annie was a lowborn. These two should be on even footing now, that no one knows who they are. They're orphans. They're gonna grow up in a society that doesn't care who you were. You all grow up even. It's not like that. That's not how it works. You can't change the privilege that was taught to you, that you got. And this book shows that as they train to be dragon riders, as they compete together to be dragon riders, society teaches them time and time again that even though no one knows who Lee is, society treats him differently than Annie. And like, I I'm just gonna insert rambling, squealing noises here because I loved this. I cried so much. I loved this. I loved this so much. I need more people to read it. I don't know how to express to you that this was my #1 book of the year, easily. And I never would have guessed it. I thought I was gonna hate this when Maria told me to read it. Thank you, Maria, for forcing me into this, because this was an incredible series. I can't even pick a favorite. Like, I could not sit here and tell you which one was my favorite, because they're all amazing. I loved all of them. They're the best thing that I read this year. And if you think that you don't like YA, give it a try. There is a romance in here. I will not tell you that this isn't YA. Like, it is a YA series. There is YA romance. The characters are frustrating like a YA character is, but the world building is cool. The politics are deep and discussionful, and there are a lot of positives. I think that if this had been aged up, so many people would love it. Like, fans of the Chronicles of the Unhewn Throne would easily love this as an aged up series. It just happened to be YA. But I still think give it a try. Give it a try. I mean, if the YA bothers you, it bothers you. But if you can get past it, it's incredible. And there's dragons. There we go. Those are my favorite books of 2023. I hope we can beat this reading year in 2024. Probably 5 of these are like all-time favorite series when they're done. The ones I have read, 3 that are completed read, will be on my top 10 favorite series ever when I update it next year. I guarantee you. And I think a lot of the ones that aren't completed will, when they're completed, make it as well. So thank you so much to everyone for making this such an incredible year of reading. All these authors. I cannot wait to see what 2024 brings me. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, let me know what your favorite read of 2023 was. And if you'd like to leave me an emoji just to say you were here, leave me a red emoji for Fireborn. And then if you want to connect with me on other platforms, my Bookstagram, my Book Twitter, my Goodreads, and my Patreon are all linked in the description bar below. Have yourselves an absolutely remarkable day and reading year.